So in today's video, we're going to rank every single Flagship module currently available on the market. For the sake of this video, I'm defining Flagship as the highest end module a company currently makes. But we'll be splitting them into different pricing brackets so it stays fair. I just want to see what happens when you take the very best drum module from each of these electronic drum companies and see how they stack up against each other. Unfortunately, I can't cover every single one of these modules that you see on screen. I got to get rid of some. So to start with, all the low effort companies like Edrum, Carlsbro, Donner, and others, they've got to go. Next, I won't be including any region-specific brands that are sold in one country or one area of the world only. That means Simmons, Gear for Music, Millennium, Sudoku, and WHD don't make the cut. Cap Percussion didn't make it in because their Flagship module is currently a rebranded 2-box. And finally, I'm not including a very large list of Chinese brands not sold in standard worldwide music store chains. So EDS, Lemon, HXM, Medley, and others are out. Alright, so now we're down to 9 contenders. Pearl, 2-box, Roland, Yamaha, Alesis, ATV, F-Note, Gava, and NuX. Now looking back, I probably wouldn't have included NuX again, but I'm kind of stuck with it because I've already done all the polling data. I wanted there to be 3 contenders in the lowest price bracket, and the Cap Percussion KT300 module is a modified NuX DM7X, so I thought this killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, so let's start off with what I'm going to call Tier 3 flagships, everything under $1,000. In this category, we've got the ATV 85 coming in at $900, the NuX DM7X coming in at $300, and the Alesis Strike coming in at roughly $700 when you can find it separately on sale. Okay, so let's start off with the polling results first. Coming in at 3rd place, and surprise to almost nobody, except for 22 people apparently, is the NuX DM7X. Moving ahead to 2nd place, we have the ATV 85 with 19% of the vote. And finally, coming in 1st place with an absolute massive lead is the Alesis Strike. Okay, so this is the one poll that I completely agree with. I do think the Alesis Strike should be up on top because it does so many things right. It's got tons of inputs, it's got tons of outputs, it's got a color screen on it with a decent user interface. Unlike the ATV 85, it can do compression, it can do EQ, you can layer sounds. There's a multi-layer sample import. The drum module also has like more sounds than the majority of modules on this list. And some of the newer sounds in the later updates are really freaking good. Now, of course, there's a lot of trash sounds inside of it too, but you don't have to use those. Just pick the good ones and you'll have a great time. Now, of course, this isn't to say that the ATV 85 doesn't have any advantages of its own. It has better triggering, especially with third-party pads. I believe it has lower latency. The build quality of the outside, the metal chassis, that's a little bit nicer than the plasticky Alesis Strike. And also, I think the preamps for the headphone jack and the master outputs are a little bit nicer on the ATV 85 as well. But aside from those things, at the end of the day, most people out there, according to this poll, would rather take home an Alesis Strike. Now let's move ahead to Tier 2 flagship modules. So in this ranking, we've got the 2-box Drum at 5 Mark II coming in at $1,867. We also have the Yamaha DTX Pro X coming in at $1,540. And then finally, we have the F-Note EFD 7X. As far as pricing, I'm guessing it will be roughly $1,100 to $1,200 based on the pricing of their other drum modules, like their 5 Series and 3 Series. I've been checking websites and even reached out to an electronic drum store that will sell this in the future, but they just haven't been given stock yet and they haven't been given an official price yet from F-Note. Okay, so with that being said, let's move ahead to the polling results. In last place, we have the 2-box Drum at 5 Mark II. In 2nd place, we have the F-Note EFD 7X. And finally, in 1st place, with an absolute massive lead, we have the Yamaha DTX Pro X coming in with 64% of the vote. Ironically, on Instagram, 2-box came in 2nd place because of 2 votes. But way more people voted on YouTube, so it overrode those polling results. So yeah, 2-box is in 3rd place. Okay, so let's break down this poll. In my opinion, I would probably flip the number 2 spot and the number 3 spot. Not because the F-Note module is bad, it's actually great for the kind of audience it's going for. It gives you some editing options more than ATV does, while keeping the simplicity and just something that just works, good triggering, and stays out of your way. Also, I should probably mention that if you buy the F-Note module, you have to use their hi-hats. They are some of the best hi-hats I've ever played, but you have to use those because they use a different kind of cable. It's not 1/4 inch. It delivers power and signal over one wire. But on a technical level, the 2-box is just a step above. It's got more outputs, it's got a lot of inputs, it's got universal pad compatibility, you can import tons and tons of samples. They even have an online sound store. You can take more sounds from their free store. But I didn't put this module in first place because it does have a few weaknesses. The user interface isn't the best in class. They waste the entire left side of the module with these trigger buttons. E-drummers already have the pads, so they don't need them, and producers don't use drum modules, they use drum plugins, so they don't need them. In my opinion, it would have been more valuable to get faders or other important controls like Yamaha does. Next, the editing options are pretty limited compared to the first place contender. And finally, I prefer the sounds of other modules in this price class over 2-box. But taking everything into consideration, this is still a fantastic module that definitely deserves to be in the conversation. And then in first place, it is hard to argue against the Yamaha DTX Pro X. You guys know it, you all voted for it. It does almost everything a drum module of its price range should do. Number one, the sound quality is really, really good. I love playing with the built-in sounds. It's got plenty of inputs, it's got lots and lots of outputs that you can route however you want. Even the user interface is really well laid out. They got dedicated kit modifier knobs, so you can change the effects, the compression, the ambience, and also the reverb all right there without having to dive into a menu. You can also adjust tuning right on the front of the module, muffling, and instruments. Now the one thing I want to mention is that I've heard conflicting things about how well this Yamaha module works with third-party mesh pads and triggers. So do your own research before buying this if you want to use it with like a custom DIY setup. When I had the module, I stupidly didn't test it rigorously with a lot of third-party options, so I'm just going off of word of mouth here. Do your own research before buying it. Okay, so now let's move ahead to Tier 1 electronic drum modules. The cool thing about doing this now is that all of these modules have had a major update of some kind. The TD50 went from the TD50 to the TD50X with more sounds and pad support for the digital hi-hats and other things they did to the inner workings of the module. The Pearl Mimic Pro added multi-layer round-robin sample import as a feature, along with more sounds, and finally it added more pad trigger presets. On the Gava one, they updated the trigger engine, optimized the drum module a little bit, and added some more free sounds. Now to be transparent with you guys, I personally have tried out the Gava one with the update, and I've tried the TD50X with the update, but I haven't tried the Pearl Mimic Pro with the new update. I've only played it with the older updates. Okay, so now let's move ahead to the polling results. Starting off with the one that I posted on Instagram. You guys put Gava firmly in third place with about 9% of the vote. The Pearl Mimic Pro came in second place with 38% of the vote. And in first came the Roland TD50X with 53% of the vote. Now, that Instagram poll was a pretty small sample size. I did run a much larger poll on YouTube though, with nearly 1,000 votes. This time, the Pearl Mimic got absolutely decimated, only capturing 24% of the vote. Meanwhile, the Roland TD50X ran away with the lead at 76% of the vote. In my opinion, I completely agree that the Gava G9 should be in last place. I played it over and over again, and I just played it with a brand new update, and it still doesn't have the polish or the sound quality of its two more expensive rivals. But to be fair, the Gava G9 does have some good features. It has an excellent port selection, it has a larger touchscreen than the Pearl Mimic with more controls on the side, it has universal pad compatibility, it can display sheet music, and it's been continually supported with updates. Now moving ahead to the first and second spots, this is much more difficult to rank these, because these are both fantastic and they have different strengths and weaknesses. On the Roland side, it has support for the digital hi-hats, snare, and ride, so that's great. It has way more editing options. You can edit these sounds to death. It has a really long track record of Roland flagships going back to the 1980s. I think this module also has a better port selection, at least for what I want. It has 2 XLR outputs, it has 2 headphone jacks at different sizes, and it also has 2 mix inputs. This means, and I actually have, connected 2 multipads to it at the exact same time. But on the Pearl Mimic side, it has the sound quality. If you really think about it, sound is subjective, but at the end of the day, which module has samples on more records? The Pearl Mimic Pro, because it's using Steven Slate drums, and Steven Slate drum samples have been used on tons and tons of actual albums. Now, I'm sure somebody out there has used a TD50 sound or two inside of an album, but not to the degree or the consistency that people have used Steven Slate drum samples. Also, I feel like the Pearl Mimic interface is a little bit more intuitive. You can feel free to disagree or agree, but I just feel like the TD50 module layout is a little bit weird. And this is coming from somebody that owns a Roland TD30. But the final 2 aces up the sleeve of the Pearl Mimic is the fact that it works with pads from pretty much any manufacturer that you throw at it. But the one big feature that caught the attention of a ton of Edrum nerds is the fact that it now has support for multi-layer round-robin sample input. You can bring in entire Superior Drummer 3 kits straight inside of the Pearl Mimic. If you're the kind of drummer with the patience to learn how to do that and go through that process, this module has unlimited potential. But to be fair, the Pearl Mimic does have some weaknesses of its own. Pearl made the strange choice not to include a USB Type-B port. Because of that, there is no multi-channel audio over USB, and no USB MIDI. Those industry standard features missing on a $2,500 drum module is frustrating. Also, some people gravitate towards Roland because there's less setup friction when using their first-party pads. The Pearl Mimic is meant to work with nearly every drum and cymbal on Earth, so while it does take more initial effort to set everything up, the payoff is more than worth it for a lot of people. On a technical level, I do think the Pearl Mimic Pro is the best of what electronic drums have to offer at the moment. But we're not quite done yet, because I realize it can be a little bit unsatisfying to artificially break up all these modules into 3 different categories like that. So at the end of the video here, I'm going to do one extra bonus ranking, the Justin Fun Ranking. I want to break this down into which modules I've just personally had the most fun playing. Do not take this list as gospel or as very serious or anything like that. This is just the modules that I like playing and the ones that I've had less fun playing. So in the number 9 spot, I'll still put the new XDM7X. I still have not played this module, but I played the Cat Percussion KT300, which was a modified version of the same thing, so I'll just say that I've already played it. Moving ahead to the number 8 spot is the Gava G9. Gava G9, it always has one sort of issue or another that I'm battling at the moment. For example, in the last review of it, I had an issue where it corrupted some of the sounds during the update process, so I had to go and update it again. I'm not saying it is number 8 in quality, I'm just saying it's been number 8 in fun. Moving ahead to the number 7 spot, I've got the ATV AD5. It is a decently fun module to play, but it kind of runs short because you sort of hit the limits of the module really quickly. It is overly simplified. Moving ahead to the number 6 spot, I've got the 2-Box Drum at 5 Model 2. It's a great module, but the thing is, it's not really my thing to do a lot of multi-layer sample import. I just use drum plugins or I use the built-in sounds. That's just kind of my thing. Because I don't really love the built-in sounds of the 2-box module, that's why I'm going to put it here in 6th place. It's still a great module though. Moving ahead to the number 5 spot, I've got the Alesis Strike. Now the quality of this module isn't on par with like the quality of some of the other ones, but as far as pure fun and some of the sounds that are built into it and some of the capabilities that it has, it's a really enjoyable module to use. At least on first-party Alesis pads. Your mileage may vary if you try to use this with third-party pads. Moving ahead to the number 4 spot, I've got the F-Note EFD7X. It's kind of like stays out of your way and just does its job. Moving ahead to the number 3 spot, I'm going to put the Yamaha DTX Pro X. It sounds great, a lot of inputs, a lot of outputs. It's got a ton of capabilities that I'll probably never use. It's got a decent user interface with a lot of controls right there. It just does a lot of things right and it's fun to use. Moving ahead to the number 2 spot, I'm going to put the Pearl Mimic Pro. It is a fun drum module to use once you've dialed all the pads in to respond correctly. And the sounds are fantastic. You don't have to rely on drum software, you just use the built-in sounds, you got all those outputs, you got all those inputs, and you can use drums from any company that you want. Finally, moving ahead to the number 1 spot, I'm going to put the Roland TD50X. The reason why I like this so much is that I played it on a Roland VAD 706, and that is currently my favorite electronic drum set in the market. It is so fun to play using the digital hi-hats, the digital ride, the digital snare. The TD50X, because it has support for those individual pads, it makes the module more than the sum of its parts. It's not just a module, it's part of a system. It's also really fun to adjust like the virtual snare wires, the virtual shell depth, the virtual ping color of the ride cymbal. The amount of effect adjustments that you have is just out of this world. Better triggering out of the box, in my opinion, when using it with first-party pads. It does have some stuff going for it. For the most part, if there's a famous drummer doing a stadium tour and he needs a drum module, he's going to have a TD50 of some kind. And that's the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Especially thank you to the people on Patreon who help support this channel. Have an awesome day. See you in a few.